Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. Thank you all. Those who are gathered here safely, just want to reiterate that, and those who are continuing to be a part of this community. What I'm so aware of in this moment is that there is a work that God has called us to do as this church, that there is something that we are here to bring into the collective consciousness of the possibility of transformation and healing on planet Earth. That's why we're here. That we have come together as a holy community, called to a holy purpose. Many people have forgotten the truth that God is within them. Amen? Many people have forgotten that we are meant to be living in love and divine intelligence. But we know. And we come to be reminded. I didn't know how this was going to feel this morning, so I don't have a joke. I just wanted to step into this space. I can feel you. I can feel you. We're going through it, are we not? This has been, I don't know, whoever is writing the script for 2020, I think we need some revisions. And yet, it's perfect, right? That's what we understand, is that we've been talking about 2020 vision. Boy, are we seeing some things we did not want to look at. But here, in this church, I'm here to remind you of the truth that God is present. There is a blessing in the hard time as well as the good time. That there is a call, even in the storm, for us to come through refined by it. To know more of the presence of the indwelling Christ within us. That's what we're here to do. This month in June, Karen, thank you so much, Reverend Karen Tudor, who gave us our message last week to start off. That was a beautiful talk on Queen Esther. And we're talking about divine integration. Here's the way this works. We have over 100-year history in this church of teaching the power of divine mind working through the individual to recreate the conditions of life. That's what we're here to do. And there is a time and a season. There is a time for us to claim our truth and stake our feet upon the grounding of God's presence and call forth the change condition in the way that we desire. And we spend a lot of time teaching that and practicing that, and it works, and it does transform your experience. And sometimes something has appeared in our life that was not in our affirmation or on our vision board. Have you noticed this? And we don't seem to be able to affirm it or treat it or pray it away. Have you noticed? What do we do then? I think what's being asked for from us is an integration. That new information is coming in, and we did not understand the full scope of what God was doing in our world and in our lives. And this, too, is for our good. Some healing, some miraculous new insight and way of being is being called for, and this thing that is standing in the way is the way, because it's here. So today we're talking, my message is called, Are You Listening? Because some of us like to talk and proclaim and affirm and speak our word of faith, but we're not listening to the messages that life is giving us in response. And so what I hope to do for us today is absolutely give us a message of healing and possibility and inspiration and overcoming. But it's not praying away that which has presented itself. It's asking, what's here for me? Why is this here? Let's listen to why this is here. There are two short illustrations of this concept. I was new in this New Thought teaching. This was many years ago. I was attending a conference and providing some music in Atlanta, and there was a New Thought minister, a religious science minister, was sharing, and she told this story about how she was a veteran minister, and she had led her community through the purchase of property and building a new building, and it was healthy and vital, and it was growing, and she was having this feeling like her time was completing there. She's like, that can't be right. It's just getting good. And so she kept doing her affirmative prayer. I am in my perfect place doing this work. And she said it was like she kept putting it back together, but something was just, it kept coming apart. Not in the physical, the conditions were great. And one Sunday morning, she came to church in this new beautiful space, and she told her associate minister, I hope you have a talk ready because I need you to give the sermon today. And she said she walked through the building, blessing and gratitude, and she went in the nursery and she picked up one of the babies and rocked the baby that morning and walked into a board meeting that afternoon and said, I'm leaving. Now, don't worry, I'm not doing that. Or some of you may be wishing that I was, but I'm not. I'm not going anywhere. But the conditions weren't matching what life was telling her. And she listened. And she did make the space for the next leader to come in. It was perfect, and she was brought forward into her next thing. See, life will speak to us. Another minister who was supposed to be on our stage today, Reverend August Gold from New York, now in Fort Lauderdale. She, a powerhouse, and she brings the deep teaching of New Thought. She was teaching Course in Miracles and some Science of Mind classes in Eric Butterworth's church, Unity of New York, and her ministry was thriving, and a lot of her students were saying, you should start a church. And then she began to listen and feel the resonance in herself, and she thought, I think we're supposed to start a church in like 6 weeks. You can't do that. In New York City, real estate, really? You're going to start a church in 6 weeks? But she heard it, and she listened. She started talking to her team that wanted to support her, and by golly, it all came together. With a lot of effort, a lot of miraculous stories of being in the right place, and Sacred Center for Spiritual Living was born on September 9th, 2001. Do you remember what happened 2 days later in New York City? You see, the circumstances were saying, now is not the time. We can't build a church in 6 weeks. But life was speaking, and they were listening. That church grew to be hundreds of people who were rocked from the attacks of 9/11. That church grew. I got to sing there many times and got to know August, and we're going to get her here. We are. You will be so blessed by her teaching and her ministry. She was listening. And we teach intuition. Reverend Karen Tudor is a great teacher about intuition. And that's really what those two women were dealing with. They were listening for intuition. And that is a wonderful way, because sometimes it's not a match for where it's not on your vision board, but you just feel that this is where I'm supposed to go. This is what's coming to me. And that is one way of tapping into divine intelligence and listening. But what I'm actually going to talk about today is a different kind of listening. I'm going to ask us to listen to what life is telling us. So often I say we don't work at the level of condition, we work at the level of truth, and conditions change. And that is absolutely truth. And I'm going to tell you the opposite truth now. That the conditions that have assembled themselves in your life also have a message for you. And that there may be, here's the way I learned it in AA. I'm going to clean up the language a little bit. If you met one jerk in a morning, you met a jerk. If you met 3, you're the jerk. You can figure out what word I was taught in there instead. That our consciousness is creating a pattern in our life and experience. And we don't always like that pattern as it's presented back to us, right? I've told you guys many times that when I first got to a New Thought church and the minister said, if you want to know what you're thinking, take a look at your life, I wanted to run screaming from the building. Because my life was a mess, and there was no way that I created that. But I did. You know, we co-create. We love to talk about co-creating our prosperity. We love to talk about co-creating the wonderful new job. You know, the 3 Ps, the princes or princesses, palaces, and parking spaces. We can manifest, manifest, manifest. And it's great, and it works, and it's true. But we are also co-creating in the collective and individually. And the things that we're seeing in our life and in our experience are also trying to speak to us, offering a different kind of wisdom. But sometimes we're talking so much and we're so dug in our perspective that we're not willing to just stop and listen. What's here? What's here for me? That's one of the greatest questions you can ask when something has presented itself in your life that you most certainly did not ask for and was not on your vision board. What's here? If this were a doorway into my evolution, to the next stage of my becoming, what could this possibly be teaching me? And if we can learn to ask that question sooner, more frequently, and at a deeper level, we can avoid a whole lot of pain, I have found. Have you heard this? That sometimes the Spirit first will speak at a gentle whisper in the ear, second with a tap on the shoulder, and third with the cosmic 2x4. How many of you have experienced all 3 of those? All right, so this is, you know that they say that religious people believe in hell, spiritual people have been to hell. So you know that. We have learned that we have co-created the very experience for our growth, which was exactly not what we wanted. Now, I'm not saying that we have created coronavirus, but it's here. What's here for us? What are we learning about community? What are we learning about safety? What are we learning about how we care for one another? Is our faith in the stock market or is our faith in God? What's here for us? And these are the questions that if we can just say, are we listening? The title today is, Are You Listening? Don't worry, it's going to get better, I promise. But I do want to say what we're seeing right now with the protests around the country and now around the world. And I do want to be very careful in the way I mention this, lest you misunderstand me. I completely agree with Martin Luther King Jr. when he said that riots are the language of the unheard. I do not condone physical destruction of property or violence in any way, but the vast majority of the demonstrations are peaceful. People are speaking eloquently about what the experience has been and what needs to happen. Are we listening? There is an evolutionary model, Richard Rohr describes this. It's called order, chaos, reorder, or order, disorder, reorder. And this is the way evolution happens, is that we've got something, we think it works fine, except it starts to fray a little around the edges, and then pretty soon it is all falling apart. And what do we want to do? We want to go back to order. We want to just, if we can just get people to start acting right again, people do what they're supposed to do, then we'll be back in order. But what actually wants to happen from an evolutionary understanding is that a new order wants to be established of greater freedom, greater power, greater possibility. And it requires our listening. What's here? And the next question I would ask is, what's mine to do? What is mine to do here? I am not the first pastor to get called on the carpet by some church elders, I have a feeling. But I was called to a meeting on Friday. By 3, and I don't know if they want me to call them elders or not, but they're older than me, so they're elders. And they've been a part of this church for decades, individually, and 2 African American, 1 Hispanic, member of our community, and they wanted to share with me their experience of some of the bias that they've experienced in our church over the years. And boy, did I want to defend. Boy, did I just want to go, well, that's different now, you know. And what I knew to do was to just listen, because one of them told me to just shut up and listen. And they were right, to just listen. to not defend, but to hear the experience of another that is different from my own. I think that the four of us, it was, God cooperated in the weather because we wanted to be in physical space with each other, but we also wanted to be safe. So we sat out here in our beautiful courtyard Friday morning. And if you weren't outside on Friday morning in June in Houston, it was glorious. And I felt all the ancestors around us, all of the people who have loved this church, who have been holding the space of our becoming and our healing so that we can be a healing presence on earth and in Houston. I felt them around us as we had a sacred conversation. But mostly what I did was listen. I don't think I was planning on saying most of that. I've got to see what it was I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, this is important. Walter Brueggemann is an incredibly respected theologian. He's a part of the United Church of Christ, which is a progressive branch of Christianity, and he's was a professor at Union Theological Seminary and other prestigious seminaries, but he's a big thinker about how the people who follow Christ ought to show up in the world, how we ought to be with each other and with conditions and issues we face. And he's now in his late 80s, but last year he was at a conference, and on a Q&A, one of the people asked him, it's like, Dr. Brugger, if there is one thing that is needed from the church today, can you tell us what it is? And without missing a beat, he said, a non-anxious presence. You see, when we're confronted with strife and struggle in the world, sometimes we want to control, we want to get defensive, we want to start moving like this, but what he said is being asked for is a non-anxious presence. I'm glad I had that quote before my meeting on Friday. To just be, witness what is here, create a container of safety based in the faith that God is large and in charge, and hold this space, because healing will occur. But sometimes healing won't occur until we get our busy little mitts off of it. I am not at all saying we shouldn't move into decisive action. I think we need to. And I think every person and every organization needs to spend time in prayer to feel what is the right action. That society, culture does not evolve without action. Peaceful, nonviolent, conscious, decided action that is based upon spiritual principle. But first, to be a space of non-anxious presence. That's where we can listen. Reverend Karen told the story of Queen Esther last week. It's one of my favorites. I grew up in Sunday school. I love that we're doing virtual Sunday school for our kids right now, and these old stories, every kind of grade level, you get a different understanding of what these stories are, what they mean. But I was taught early on, these stories are meant to apply to my life. They're lessons we can learn from these stories of these ancient people that can then be brought forward into the way that we relate to one another and to God. I want to speak to you about the story of Samuel. Now, a couple of years ago, I gave a Mother's Day talk on Hannah, Samuel's mother, and she wanted a child. Everything within her wanted a child, and yet she was not able to conceive. And one day she comes to the temple and she just throws herself on the ground, beseeching God for a child, to the point the head priest Eli thought she was drunk and said, "Woman, lay off the wine." And she said, "No, I'm not drunk. I'm calling out to God." She knew that she was to bear a child. She felt it in the very fibers of her being. And Eli, I think, was probably just grateful she wasn't drunk and said, "Well, I hope God grants you what you want," and moves on. Well, she did conceive. She had a child, and she named him Samuel. And here's the thing about Hannah. She knew from whence she was given, and she had made a decision that she would give her son back to God's service. And then when he was old enough, she brought him back to the temple, and she said to the priest, Eli, this is the child that I prayed for. Here he is, and God has directed me to give him into God's service. Will you train him? Will you care for him? And Eli recognized the moment and brought him into the temple and began to train Samuel as a young child on what it meant to the sacred actions that were required and caring for the sacred texts and the sacred objects. And Samuel was natural for this. This was his life path. And he was still a small child, and one night after the day of training and tending to all of the things that needed to be tended to in the sacred place, they were going to sleep. And Samuel heard a voice, Samuel. Well, he got up and he goes to Eli and he said, yes, Lord, you have called me. And Eli said, no, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. So Samuel goes back and settles down. Samuel, I need you. Well, he wakes up and he runs in to see Eli again. Why do you need me? I'm here. What do you need? And Eli said, no, I didn't call you. You must be dreaming. Go back to sleep. It happens a third time. Samuel. And he wakes up and he comes running into Eli and said, I know you've called me. I've heard the voice. Speak my name. 3 times are an interesting number in biblical metaphysics. It's the time required for something to turn. A new awareness, a new way of being to descend. And on that third time, Eli got the message. He said, maybe it is the Lord speaking to this child. And he said, if it happens again, I want to get this right, this language. This should be your response. If you hear your name spoken, say, speak, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went back and lay down again, and he heard his name, Samuel, Samuel. And he remembered what his teacher had said to him, and he stood and he said, speak, your servant is listening. As a child, he knew to ask that deepest of questions. Tell me what's here. Show me what is mine to do. Direct me. That in my human mind, I don't know enough information to have all the answers. God, speak to me. I'm listening. The message he got was not a great one. I'm just going to say that. That he gave him a message about how Eli, and particularly Eli's sons, had not been acting right. They had not been treating the people in the right way, and that their due was coming. And it happened. And it had already been prophesied before that. And then the Ark of the Covenant was stolen by the Philistines in battle. And on the day that it was coming back into the people, Eli fell back in his chair and died. But he had somebody lined up. And Samuel, who was a young man by this time, was a righteous leader for his people. He still didn't always get it right. The people called for a king. He got Saul in there. Well, Saul had some issues as a leader. That's another Sunday or maybe a Sunday school lesson. But Samuel continued all of his days to listen. Speak. Your servant listens. And the people of Israel went through terrible times, beset by all kinds of problems and people opposing them and internal strife and struggle. And Samuel continued to lead as best he could and listen. And one day he was directed to go to the house of Jesse and anoint the next king of Israel. And Jesse had many fine young sons, but he said, are these all of your sons? He said, no, the youngest is out tending the flock, a shepherd boy. And Samuel said, bring him to me. And young David brought before Samuel the youngest of sons. And if you know this in Jewish culture, they were the least favored, the least likely to lead, the least likely to inherit, the least likely to have a successful life. But Samuel was told, this is the man who will be the leader of my people. I could tell you the whole Old Testament, but you get the idea. that if we're willing to listen, the journey of our becoming the next step will show you this. Do this today. Call her today. Take this class. We have a wonderful class this afternoon. If you are feeling some tug on your heart on how you can be a part of the healing of racism in our world, 2:00 today. But if you're willing to simply ask those questions, what is here? What is mine to do? You will be guided. I have been saying for a while that, boy, do we have a good angle on this thing called unity, right? If we're talking about division, what would be the solution? Unity. That our deepest theological concept is that one thing is all that's happening, the life of God, and that we are here to bring this consciousness into human experience and culture, into the world. We're here to be the light of one life into the world. Unity. And so we are stepping into it. I'd like to present to you Exhibit A. This is a t-shirt designed by our own board member, Carla Cargill. Many of you got them when you came in today. And it says black, brown, white, LGBTQ, Republican, Democrat, police. And on the bottom it says, love, peace, and respect are the cure. Let's all unite as one and be the cure. Somebody's been paying attention in certain church, that's what I know. Mother Teresa said, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. If we have no peace, it's not because people ain't acting right. Those people, again, I'm going to encourage you to release all thought of those people. Remove the language from your awareness. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. And that we, as Unity of Houston, are called to remember this for humanity, that we are one people, one life. We are here to love each other, to listen to each other, to create a holy and sacred space of healing. And it's happening. There's a light that shines in this room. Would you go to prayer with me? Speak. Your servants are listening. God, show us. Teach us. Open our hearts. Soften our hearts to you, Lord. Reveal who we are to be, to walk the path of healing, reconciliation. Show us how we can forgive, how we can make amends. Show us how we can lift and inspire. Guide us into the new day of deep understanding, brotherhood and sisterhood of all people. Let us be a part of this healing, God. Show me what is mine to do as the leader of this church. Show us all how we are to be together in sacred community, creating the world that is more in alignment with who you have called us to be. There's a light that shines in this room. There's a presence I can feel in this place. There's a spirit moving through us, alive in every face. It's the very light of God. Let our hearts be open. Let our minds be directed by your thoughts. Guide us. Show us. Encourage us and strengthen us so that the healing may be witnessed and wrought in our time, in our house, in our city, in our world. Use us, God. Speak to us. Your servants are listening. There's a light that shines in this room, and we live and move in its glow. In this moment there's a oneness, the truth of who we are. We are the light, the very light of God. We are the light, the very light of God. Amen. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.